So someone said to me last night, if you had to put money down right now, you had to put £1,000 down on any team to win the Premier League, who would you put it on? And I had a thought and I said, you know what? I think it's Arsenal. I spoke about their last-minute winners. Them and Liverpool have had a few last-minute winners. They've had that clutch season. Man City have dropped off. Liverpool are losing big names to AFCON. Arsenal have got the likes of Timber and Partey coming back in. Arsenal have a very stable core in Rice, Saliba and Gabriel. And Arteta made some interesting changes versus Brighton, where you could see tactical changes to unlock the best out of Saka and the Arsenal attack. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about why I think Arsenal will win the Premier League. And this is me saying this as a United fan with no bias at all. I said it's between Liverpool, Arsenal, City. Villa maybe could be up there, but I'm going to say why I chose Arsenal and analyse their Brighton game and what Arteta changed. Please do hit that like button and subscribe down below if you're new. I do content on the big 6, 7, where I include Newcastle now, Premier League sides, might even be including Villa and tactical videos as well as reactions. So, first of all, I want to talk about the spine, the core of Arsenal, of Gabriel, Saliba and Rice. I don't think any of them have had a bad game this season. Like, consistency. You can be a good player. Rashford can be the best player in the world for 4 months and then the worst player in the world for 4 months. But to be an elite player, you've got to be consistently good. And that is what Saliba, Declan Rice and Gabriel have brought to Arsenal. This is a stable, elite core. And I think Arsenal have conceded the least goals in the league this season, one of the best sort of defensive records and one of the hardest teams to break down. Brighton have had a shot against every single team they've played in the first half, but not against Arsenal. Brighton have scored against every single team they've played under De Zerbi, but not against Arsenal. And Arsenal's experienced core, I think, brings the stability. It works well in build-up because they're not just players that are good defensively, they're technical players, they're good on the ball. But you've got Gabriel, who's physically a beast. He wins his duels. He does the aerial stuff, can win his duels. You do Saliba, but it's also physically very quick, very good physically, power, pace. He's got that PMP. He's very good one-on-one. You don't get by him. Gabriel wins it in the air. And then you've got Declan Rice as the interception monster, which makes Saliba and Gabriel's job even easier because Declan Rice sometimes intercepts it before oppositions get into the final third. And as you can see here, Brighton, 0 shots, 0 XG versus Arsenal in that first half. That is the first time Brighton have never had a shot on target or shot at all in the first half of a game. And this was the first time Brighton haven't scored under De Zerbi, which shows how defensively solid Arsenal was. And we're going to break down what Arteta changed and why that worked as well. And we know statistically Arsenal have conceded the least line-breaking passes against them in the season, which is people getting through Arsenal's midfield line to their defensive line because of Declan Rice, and the least goals this season. While they haven't got the most clean sheets, they've conceded the least goals. And I quickly wanted to highlight Declan Rice stopping 2v1s. Here, Brighton was running at Declan Rice. It was a 2v1. Brighton had broke through Arsenal's press in attack. And Declan Rice is reading off the game to intercept the ball and then play it forward into Odegaard. Is something that he does nearly every game consistently. And that means Arsenal, who press really well and their press can be risky, if oppositions break through the Arsenal press, they then have to get through Declan Rice, who is literally like this interception monster. So I want to break down Arsenal and what they kind of did differently in that game versus Brighton. Now, the first thing that was sort of picked up by a couple of people, and I noticed, as someone that doesn't even watch Arsenal week in, week out, I'm a Man United fan, by the way, so I'm sorry if I do get things wrong. I watched most of Arsenal's games, but not all of them, was the fact that sometimes you'd expect Arsenal to go long to Havertz, use his sort of aerial ability or all of that. But Havertz and Jesus, who I've just put as number 9 and 11 in here, they dropped really deep in terms of build-up. They dropped really deep, and actually Martinelli and Saka were the most advanced. And I think this was Arsenal's way of playing over the man-to-man press, break the man-to-man press, because then that drags the physical centre-backs more in towards Havertz and Jesus, and that obviously gives Martinelli and Saka a one-on-one high up the pitch with the weaker centre-backs. And Arsenal almost played over the press from Brighton right into Saka, right into Martinelli directly. But because Havertz and Jesus went quite far in, the big bulky centre-backs obviously follow Havertz and Jesus, which gave Arsenal this advantage with the man-to-man press. But what Arsenal also have is this flexibility, which you've seen this season. Arsenal built up in many different ways, 2-2s, 2-4s, But mostly they've built up in a 3-2 kind of formation with one of the fullbacks inverting, 3 at the back with Saliba as the central centre-back. And this is what Arsenal have mostly done this season. And then they've had maybe a target man to go along to in Havertz, or they've built up very well. But Arsenal also brought in David Raya this season, and sometimes he's gone in as sort of the central centre-back or the third defender when Arsenal build up. And we've seen Arsenal this season employ 4 or 5 different styles of build-up. And one of the interesting things I think about Arsenal is they've become less predictable. They've done 4 or 5 different styles of build-up. They've got a lot of players that can rotate, and they've got a lot of players with sort of different attributes. And I think last season, Arsenal, same lineup, same system. It was very stable. It was very easy to predict. This season, while Arsenal haven't started as fast, you can see they're adapting. You can see they're changing. And you can also see what Timber and Partey are going to add, which I'm going to get into in a second. I also wanted to say that I think Arsenal did very well in pressing Brighton. They got Odegaard and Jesus that pressed Brighton very well, elite pressers. And that meant Brighton had to go out long or play wide, which meant that every time Brighton got the ball, they couldn't break the Arsenal press. They had to go long, they had to go wide, which benefited Arsenal because Arsenal were picking up those second balls. And that meant that Brighton couldn't really get much control of the game. And as a United fan, I've watched United struggle this season. And one of the reasons we struggle is because we're so crap in build-up that we keep going long. But when we keep going long, there's a 50-50 chance if you're going to win it or not, if you're going to retain the ball. And then we can't retain the ball that high up the pitch. And then we just give it away to the opposition. And the opposition hits on the counter. Boom, opposition score. And that was like it with Arsenal today. They were completely pushing Brighton out wide. They were forcing Brighton to go long, to go out wide, which meant that Arsenal kept picking up the ball, which resulted in Arsenal chances, but also meant that Brighton had less control, couldn't really get much going, so Brighton couldn't create chances as well. And one of the things that Arsenal did really, really well, and something different this season, because while Arsenal looked defensively solid, we spoke about that elite core of Saliba, Gabriel, Rice. Arsenal going forward haven't looked as good this season or as fluid, and a lot of Arsenal fans have picked that up. They were scoring loads of goals last season. They haven't looked as good or fluid, but I think in recent games they've really unlocked the attack more. I think Havertz makes a lot of off-the-ball runs that drag defenders out of position and create space for the wingers. I think obviously the fact that they play their wingers wide means that it's easier for them to go central. But one of the interesting things was I've noticed that they're always looking to play Saka or Martinelli, but there is a particular preference to Saka, and I don't know if that's because Ben White's right-footed, Declan Rice is right-footed. There's just that preference to go to Saka. But they're always trying to get Saka into space, whether that's them overloading the midfield, all the players going central, the fullbacks invert, they overload the midfield, that drags the Brighton players into the midfield, creates more space out wide, that gives the ball on Saka and gives him space to run into and go one-to-one with the defender because they're overloading the midfield. Or it's even those little things like Ben White, particularly Ben White does this, where he goes out really wide. We've seen Tomiyasu do this as well. And he goes out really wide, almost as like a fifth attacker. And then that opens up a little bit of space for him to play into, for Saka to go more central. And if Saka's coming more on the inside, then Saka's going into his stronger right foot, stronger left foot, which I'll show you here. Ben White gets the ball really wide. That drags Matoma out of position. All of a sudden, Brighton go more wide, which means there's more sort of space in that half space there for Saka to run into. And when Saka runs into that space, the ball's instantly going to be on his stronger left foot, which even gives Saka more ability to drive at players and give them a chance to do something. And that's something I think Arsenal have done really well, and Arteta's adapted to really well. Bring players in, Saka's isolated out wide, that creates Saka space one-on-one, but also get Saka on his left foot, coming inside, dribbling at people, because when it comes to dribbling, running at people 1v1, Saka is their biggest creative threat. He makes things happen. He can get the ball from one end of the pitch to the other. He always tries to make things happen. But what's the biggest addition for Arsenal this season? They've definitely adapted a little bit in recent games to look better. They're defensively solid, but they've also missed 2 big players in Timber and Thomas Partey. And I'm going to do a video once Julian Timber's return date is announced on how Julian Timber will be used for Arsenal. But essentially, Thomas Partey and Rice in the pivot is going to bring the best out of Odegaard. I actually think, while Havertz and Odegaard and Rice is in a more attacking midfield, I always say this, and I've said this a lot of times, control creates chances. And Declan Rice and Partey together will bring so much balance and control, because sometimes I think there's certain games where the Havertz, Odegaard having to go deeper, Rice midfield maybe lacks a bit of balance. Partey coming in with Rice gives it more balance, gives them more control, gives Arsenal more balanced, which means they'll naturally create more chances if they're better and build up and they're controlling the games better. It will also bring out the best of Odegaard, who's been good recent games, but I think his output has definitely dried up a little bit from last season. They've obviously got Partey and Timber coming back in, who can play as a centre-back, right-back, either in midfield. I wanted to show his heat map. He played as a right centre-back last season, but you can see how high he is up the pitch. His heat map was practically one of maybe a right-sided DM. And obviously, Arteta likes his fullbacks to have the versatility to come inside and overload the midfield to help with build-up. And that is something that Timber will be good at because he's an elite carrier of the ball. He's an elite progressor of the ball. And then you've also got Declan Rice, who's shown that he has the traits to be an 8. Like, I think Declan Rice is a 6 and he will be Arsenal's 6, but he's shown he has the ability to play further forward. He's good on the ball. Declan Rice is not only that interception monster that protects the back four, but he's really good going forward. He's very, very good at getting the ball, controlling it, using his body to scan, evade the press, and then go forward. He can break the lines. He can do those quick 1-2s and runs. He progresses the ball a lot, and he's a box threat in the final third. Declan Rice has the ability to play as an 8, go further forward, and actually help out. And I actually think Partey dropping back and Rice advancing with Odegaard could really help Arsenal in terms of final third build-up, breaking down the final line of the opposition's team's defence, which I think is something Arsenal have massively struggled with. But also, we've seen Partey be used as a right back at times. Maybe he wants to sort of play around with that. It gives Arsenal a lot of versatility and flexibility, and I think that's what gives Arsenal the cutting edge. Is I think their versatility and flexibility. They've got Jesus and Havertz, who are very different. Jesus, his output is all right, but in terms of his all-round game, honestly, one of the best strikers in terms of all-round game. Havertz is a very different player. He's a very unpredictable player. He's starting to get the goals now for Arsenal. He makes those runs that confuse defenders, throw them off guard, and he gets in the right areas. And I think Havertz will actually end up having quite good output this season. Jesus just links up with Martinelli really well. You've got Zinchenko and Timber that can stretch the width or they can invert. You've got Rice and Partey that can play across the midfield, drop into right back. And you've even got Raya, who has been picked over Ramsdale for his ability to sort of help in build-up. And I think with all of this at Arsenal right now, the fact that they're just scoring those last-minute clutch goals, which is just such a title-winning side, the fact that even when they've had periods this season where they weren't playing as well as last season, they got the win over the line. Man City aren't getting those wins over the lines. Arsenal played better football at the beginning of last season, but this season they were not playing at their best, but still getting the wins over the line, and they're gradually getting better and they're gradually clicking. So if they're winning when they weren't at the best, they're going to obviously win when at the best. And Man City are very reliant on Rodri. Obviously, if Declan Rice gets injured, it's a different story for Arsenal. If Saliba gets injured, it's a different story for Arsenal. But Man City are very reliant on Rodri. Kovacic has not been up to replacing Gundogan, who they're missing. Kevin De Bruyne has been missing. Guardiola hasn't been as good as expected. Ruben Diaz has dropped off massively. In terms of defensive stability, Rice, Saliba, Gabriel looks the most solid. And now Arsenal got into Anfield, but Liverpool weren't at their best against United. We're a little bit frustrated. And that might give Arsenal some confidence. I think Anfield will be a massive test because Liverpool and Arsenal are two favourites to win the league. But I think right now, this is why I think Arsenal can win the league. Smash a like, smash a subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye.